On today's show, the Cleveland Cavaliers are on the brink to win or go home. We'll talk all about Game 5. Get you ready for it on a new episode of Locked On Cavs.
You are Locked On Cavs, your daily Cleveland Cavaliers podcast.
I'm Chris Manning, covering the Cavs and the NBA for places like SB Nation, Cleveland Magazine, Forbes, and more. That man over there is Evan Dammarrell, the founder of independent site Down Euclid, which covers the entire sports scene. As always, we have Jake Stevens producing, and the music you heard on the way in is from our friends at Astro Radio. Remember, download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Last-minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Thanks again for making Locked On Cavs your first listen every day. Remember, we are free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Also want to remind you that the Cavs play the Knicks in Game 5 on Wednesday. That's at 7 p.m. It is do or die time. Catch every moment of the Cavs' hometown broadcast with SiriusXM on the SXM app. Search Cavs in the app. Evan, Cavs Knicks Game 5, 7 p.m. NBA TV for television. If you're not attending the game or whatever, we're going to start today's show, segment 1, diving into what we can look for to see what the Cavs can do to maybe extend the series. Give me something you are looking at to say, okay, how can the Cavs extend the series and at least get themselves to Game 6 before we talk about, okay, and they come back from 3-1. How can they at least get to Game 6?
More than anything, they can't look tentative. They can't look similar to how they appeared on the court in games 3 and 4 against New York. They really have to come out with that sense of urgency that they've been kind of lacking all series long against New York. Like that, the same sense of urgency that the Knicks have just been meeting them with every single game. They have to play like a team that is staring down the barrel of elimination and could very well see their season come to an end, and they need to leave it all out on the floor. I know this is a bunch of cliches, but you can really tell that the Cavs just sometimes have this issue. It's a recurring theme all season long, but it's definitely been evident in this series that New York kind of sucker punches them a little bit or just roughs them up a little bit to open the game. You saw in Game 2 that Cleveland responded well to that and started to impose their own will on the Knicks, and you need to kind of bottle that up somehow in essence and just apply it to whatever is working for you, whether that's the practice or just in game-to-game scenarios. And that's probably the biggest thing they have to do. And then there's small, minute stuff as well that we could really break into over the course of this episode. But just in terms of the grand scope of it, like they can't be tentative. They can't be playing with anxiety. They can't press and just kind of like have that negative, intrusive thought in the back of their mind saying like, okay, well, if we mess up, we're done for the year, because you could really beat yourself before the game even gets started if you kind of just go through that vicious cycle and obsess over that idea.
I think that's a good place to start. I think Game 2 is clearly the only game Cleveland has taken it to New York. I don't know if that was just like a one-game thing because the Knicks got Game 1 and they didn't feel they needed to. I think I'm the first 5 minutes, I think, of this game, which is in Cleveland. Curious to see what the crowd is going to be like. Curious to see what the Cavs players look like. Curious to see what the Knicks players look like. I am very curious just to see what all of that kind of radiates and what that kind of feels. My first thing is I look at the Donovan Mitchell point of this because I think they have to get him going. And look, the Knicks are throwing hard doubles on him. They're trapping him. Like they're making it hard on him. And guys like Deuce McBride have stepped in and done a really good job on Mitchell. This hasn't just been like one person is locking him up, but they've gotten an army of guys in a scheme that has really frustrated Mitchell. But I think playing faster, I think getting him some more screens, I think trying to do what they've done with Garland and bring him off ball to initiate the offense. I think there's things they need to do not to give Mitchell going. Some of this is like a Mitchell stylistic. Some of this I think is like a way Mitchell likes to play. But I think if there's ever a time to adjust, it's win or go home time. And they're just not going to win this game. They don't have a lick of coming back if he plays like he did the other night.
Yeah, it's an interesting thought exercise just because other than game 1 and then game 2 where he was responsible for a lot of the playmaking responsibilities for Cleveland, Donovan Mitchell has been a little up and down, topsy-turvy against the Knicks in terms of his scoring. And I think, to your point, the Knicks have found ways to dial up the pressure a little bit and make him uncomfortable, whether that's just the drop coverage they're running or maybe just simply the fact that Mitchell's shots weren't falling in. Prior or after practice on Tuesday, April 25th, Mitchell was talking about how he is a faith of the process. He isn't too rattled by the fact that his shots just aren't really falling like they were or have. And he said, I have faith in the fact that I can make these shots. You guys have seen it. I've seen it. I know it's possible to make it happen, but it's just maybe, again, like if you come out with that edge and you're not pressing too much and you're able to find some sense of calm through just seeing the first few shots go in, that's kind of the right process to go about it. And if you're Mitchell, more than anything, these are the moments the Cavs traded you for. Like, you are a big time playoff performer. This is quite literally the biggest stage that this Cavs team will be on in terms of the playoffs, because it's win or go home at this point. And you're going to have to really tap into Mitchell a little bit. And maybe this is an instance where we see him be selfish offensively or just take over the scoring responsibilities, or he's completely locked in. And a lot of it does start with Mitchell. And then if he's able to get it going and just builds that momentum and maybe New York adjusts, there's going to be a snowball effect for the rest of Cleveland's roster, especially from Darius Garland, who also needs to step up in terms of production. But I really think all the pressure, not all the pressure, but a lot of the pressure is going to be on Mitchell heading into this game.
I think the other person that there's pressure on is Darius Garland to kind of get things going. There's stuff with Evan Mobley in the series that we haven't really hit on yet. I want to at some point. I don't know if this is the right moment. This isn't the right moment to do it. I think like there's some really nitty gritty stuff to get into with his offense that I think is worth. That's not worth the whole thing here. But I think the game 2 Garland we saw and the third quarter to open the third quarter of game 4 are the Garland you need. Aggressive, active, I think doing a pretty good job staying in front of Brunson. And that, to me, that goes hand in hand with, I think you got to trust Okoro too. I think you got to just ride that out. I've been saying this the entire series. I will not be going away from, I think, this point, but I just trust him and what he's actually going to provide you in terms of helpful basketball much more than I do Cedi Osman. I think you got to just roll. Like, if he misses 2 shots, like, let him take a third, let him take a fourth. Like, you got to, like, this previews a future take, but like I think if you're not going to trust him to do that stuff, then you might as well just like find a way to move on from him in the summer. If you're not going to trust him now, then what's the point here? You better go find someone you can trust. I think you got to give him the reps. Osman has not worked. I think Okoro has not worked perfectly, but it has worked better. So that's where I go. I'm Evan. The Cavs right now are 5.5 point favorites in this game according to FanDuel. That feels
which
high.
Is surprising to me.
That is very in line with what the line has been for the other Cavs home games. And that line at this point in the series feels to me like, it's like, oh, this series has been even. Let's give the team that was the higher seed, had better numbers all year, and is the home team the bump. That feels aggressive to me. Like I don't know who I would necessarily peg as a favorite, but the Knicks have been the better team the entire series, and that's not really debatable.
Yeah, the Knicks have been the better team in every facet of the game. And that line does surprise me because I believe they're 1.5 or maybe 2.5 point favorites in game 1, Cleveland, and then New York was a 1.5 point favorite in game 2. So like I don't want to say dramatic, but like that's a wider margin of favoritism from FanDuel at the end of the day, which
happens when you go from like being the road team to the home team. Like you get a bump being at home, but that feels like a 3.5 point bump feels like a lot.
That's a pretty big swing, just especially compared to game 1, where a lot of folks, myself included, thought like, okay, the Cavs are going to show out and really just kind of maybe set the tone early into this one because they're saying all the right things and they are a very good home team. But that point spread, at least for just like the margin, is very surprising to me. What's also surprising to me today, Chris, is how many tickets are available for sale. And if you folks, you want to get in on the action, you should check out today's sponsor, Gametime. Chris, let them know all about it.
Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Buying tickets should never be stressful. Gametime is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater near you. With killer deals on last-minute tickets and their best price guarantee, you can stop stressing over tickets and start getting hyped for the fun you'll have. They have flash deals on last-minute tickets, easy to find and buy tickets for every kind of event in your area, images of seat views. I know, for instance, not even just in my area, I'm going to be in New York in August, and I'm planning on using Gametime to get tickets to the Liberty Aces game in Brooklyn. Can't wait for that. Forget planning months in advance. Gametime has deals on tickets right now up to the day event. That includes Game 5 if you're in the market for that. Get exclusive flash deals on tickets for football, basketball, baseball, concerts, comedy, theater, and more. The Gametime guarantee means you'll always get the best price. If you can find tickets in the same section and in a row for less, Gametime will credit you 110% of the difference. Snag the tickets you want without the stress with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Today's episode is also brought to you by PrizePicks, where first-time users get up to a 100% bonus on their first purchase. To play, pick 2 to 5 players, and if they go score more or less than their entry, they get it. You win. There's no competing against other people. It is just you versus the projections available. PrizePicks offers projections on any sport that you watch. This includes the NBA, NFL, and many, many more. Entries can be made in 60 seconds or less. It is that easy. They offer safe and fast withdrawals. Currently operational in over 30 states and Canada. Download the PrizePicks app or go to prizepicks.com and to sign up and play daily fantasy sports. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with the promo code LOCKEDON. If you deposit $100, PrizePicks will give you $100. If you deposit $50, PrizePicks will give you $50. Don't forget to enter that promo code LOCKEDON and sign up for an instant deposit match up to $100. All right, we're back. Segment 2 here. Evan, want to thank everyone in our listenership for making Locked On Cavs your first listen every day. Every day, we'll be back after Game 5 with a recap of a win-or-go-home game for the Cavs. Big, big one. Also remind you that the Cavs do play the Knicks in Game 5 at 7 p.m., win or go home. Catch every moment of the Cavs hometown broadcast on the Sirius XM app. Search Cavs. All right, so, Evan, to dive into the next part of this, I think the other thing I am curious about when we're thinking about Game 2, or Game 5, excuse me. I was trying to find things that worked for the Cavs in the series, and I'm kind of struggling to find things that have like overwhelmingly worked game in and game out. Like, I think the guard screen stuff has worked. I think there are things that in small sample sizes have worked, but I couldn't find much or think of much that I was like, oh, this was like a repeated successful thing. Like, Mobley's had some moments at the rim, like again the guard on guard screening. You know, LeVert, when he's played well, has worked, but there's nothing to me that has felt particularly like overwhelmingly positive for Cleveland. Does anything come to mind for you?
Well, it's understandable, at least offensively, why things haven't felt positive. I believe. Yeah, every team in the field, Cleveland has the worst offensive rating in the playoffs currently. And it is tricky because if you just look at the slice of Game 2, there's a lot of successful stuff that worked for Cleveland, whether it was the guard-on-guard screening, as you had mentioned, or Karis LeVert just having it going, or more than anything, Darius Garland cooking. But JV Bickerstaff and the Cavs punted on that plan, relegated Isaac Okoro to the very back end of the rotation. You see Ricky Rubio minutes, Karis LeVert starts, yada, 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 so on and so forth. And if you're the Cavs, one, I'm curious what the approach is going to be heading into Game 5. Do you stick with Karis LeVert in the starting lineup? Because again, I understand the optics of starting LeVert because offensively it gives you a little bit more of an extra spark. And when you're in a hostile environment like New York, maybe you need a little bit of that edge just to help maybe swing things in your favor, because this is the place that the Cavs have struggled with all season, or now, as we know, are 0-4 at. So For me, things that just kind of stood out, and I can just look through the vignette of game 2, is Donovan Mitchell again stepping up, and maybe New York just throwing a little bit more defensive attention at him in game 2. And he was bending the defense to his will. And one of the best plays the Cavs had in that game was Jared Allen flared down to the top of the key. He was still posting up, I believe they were on Robinson or Randall. Mitchell kicks it down to him. Allen doesn't even try to post up because New York then collapses on him. It was either RJ Barrett or somebody else went after him. But he then kicked it out to Darius Garland, who was just left wide open on the perimeter, and he was able to take advantage of just a very clean and open shot opportunity. And in Garland's case, he's, I don't want to say a front runner, but this is the case for a lot of guys that are high volume scorers at times. Like, they need to see the ball going at least once or twice. And for Garland, that was like a moment of clarity and affirmation, especially after just a very tough playoff debut in game 1. So a little bit more of that, please. Just maybe getting a little bit more creative with the offense. And to your point, I mean, riding the Isaac Okoro wave does make sense. I don't know if you'd let him heave up 4 shots or so, but like let him try to find a bit of a rhythm, find some confidence, and at least keep New York honest on defense, because the Knicks for sure are going to just wall Okoro off and say, go ahead, we dare you to shoot from the perimeter, and he has to make him pay for it. And like, I mean, this is something we've said about Okoro all season long, but there's small stuff from game 3 that worked that should be transferable. I'm just still confused by the fact, I mean, I know Bickerstaff gave an answer, but it doesn't really give me much clarity, but of why they didn't take what worked in game 2 and travel with that to New York for 3 and 4.
I mean, I think the answer is like they over adjusted. Like, I think they really over adjusted for game 3s and game 4, and they didn't like really do anything different for game 4. The big thing about this series, Evan, and I think the offensive stuff I think is right, because like neither team has like the Cavs defense has held up really well.
Cleveland has done a very good job defensively in this series. So is New York.
The problem is that like if you're Cleveland, you're not winning, so like it doesn't matter. But I don't think either team has like actually played well. So these are both in the bottom 3. Both these teams, the Cavs and Knicks, are in the bottom 3 in terms of turnovers per game. The Cavs are the last in that category in the playoffs. The Knicks have the 2nd worst field goal percentage. The Cavs have the 5th worst field goal percentage. The Knicks are the worst 3-point shooting team. The Cavs are the 4th worst 3-point shooting team. The series has not been like good basketball. Like if you go and watch like Warriors Kings or like parts of Suns Clippers before Kawhi got hurt, there was like some really, really high level, awesome basketball that was fluid, that was modern. This has not been that. And I think maybe this is part of why this series feels even worse, because the Cavs have just not had like any sort of offensive quality for much of the series. Their spurts, game 2 was like the game where it's like, oh, we made shots. It's funny how much better your offense looks and what the numbers say when you actually just like make some freaking shots. But the series just has not been high quality, and I think when it gets there, it's like, okay, both teams are playing well defensively. The Knicks are really stymieing the Cavs more than and have made a lot of great adjustments, and they're killing them on the offensive glass most every night. I think the combination of those two things, it just kind of left like a very just like, what are poking the Cavs with a stick, like please do something vibe. That is where I've gotten with this.
And I think you're pretty spot on that. I was doing the math as you were talking and as I was listening, and Cleveland is holding New York to 98 points per game through the first 4. New York is holding Cleveland to 94 points per game through the first 4 games. And it is a 4-point swing. It does feel like it's that much at the end of the day. And it's just curious to me where Cleveland can find that offensive spark. I think for the Knicks, RJ Barrett has emerged a little bit. I wouldn't say like he's the most reliable third option, but like you have him, you have Josh Hart, like Emmanuel quickly was feeling himself a little bit, especially in game 4. Like the Knicks have the legs, they have the strength. And for the Cavs, they have to be a little more dynamic than they have been static at this point, just because they're so reliant on maybe just Donovan Mitchell making a couple like hero shots, or reliant on Darius Garland, and who really came alive in the third quarter of game 4, but like more of just like finding that balance of being selfish and shooting or trying to get everybody involved. And it's hard because New York is feeling themselves a bit. They're hitting a lot of 3-pointers, and Cleveland's counter action or counter move is to instead attack in the paint. And the math checks out there too. 3 is worth more than 2. And just the Cavs need to find maybe some more ways to get more creative on offense. And that in which the issue is the Cavs kind of lack the depth and personnel to match the Knicks, so they really got to be relying on their stars for however long this series remains.
That Akron degree really coming in handy, telling you that 3 is bigger than 2.
Listen, man, I don't remember much from college, but if basic math is what I retained.
All right, we're gonna be segment 3. We're gonna talk about like who is sort of to blame for some of this. Like, there's a lot of finger pointing at JB Bickerstaff. I think some of it is very warranted, but there's another guy who has a longer contract extension than JB Bickerstaff, who has a bigger title than JB Bickerstaff, who doesn't have to like stand in front of people and stuff that I think is worth talking about. So we'll do that. I want to thank you again for making us your first listen every day. Every dayers, again, we'll be back after Game 5, recapping a win or go home. That's a big one. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Grand slams, no-hitters, and double plays are back. Well, not for the Guardians, because they're not playing well right now. And there's no better place to get in on the MLB action than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. That's because right now, new customers can step up to the plate with a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. Just go to FanDuel.com/lockedon and sign up. Place your first bet and get up to $1,000 back in bonus bets if you don't win. So don't miss out on your chance to get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000 when you join FanDuel today. Just go to FanDuel.com/lockedon to sign up. FanDuel, official partner of Major League Baseball. They have a ton of great NBA bets too if that's your jam. The Cavs, remember, are 5.5-point favorites at home for Game 5 if you have your eye on that. So Evan, here's just something I think is worth exploring and thinking about. We're likely headed towards the end of this series, the end of the Cavs season in the coming days. Maybe it's not Wednesday. Maybe they win, save off elimination, and they go back to New York and lose Game 6 or something. But 3-1, unless it's 2016, is really hard. Like, even the Bucks, who like were my title pick and are heavy on us, like they're down 3-1 to the Heat, and like you give them a 30% chance of winning that series. I don't know. It's really hard to come back from 3-1. I think what is worth exploring here is that I think what has gotten the Cavs here is just not all coaching. I think JB has done a lot wrong in this series.
Mm-hmm.
I think it is just worth remembering that while I'm sure he has opinions and input on guys on the roster, he sees scouting reports, he has all these other responsibilities. Kobe Altman is also the one who like assembled this roster. He is the one who pulls the lever on the Donovan Mitchell trade, him in ownership.
Is this your Rizzo moment?
No, I don't have. No, what are you talking about?
I'll send you the article. Go ahead.
No, if you think I'm going to get into like hot takery, Evan, then you literally don't know me. This is a very pragmatic take. What this is you have a president of basketball operations who like is not the fall guy in this situation, and this is where I really empathize with JB on a human level. He has to do more media than any player, any person in the front office. That is part of the job. That is just what you sign up for as an NBA head coach. It's never always totally fair to me that like, well, I don't know if like would ever get a GM or a president of basketball operations to like take questions all the time, as much as I think there'd be some value in it, or doing like regular radio hits with like Ken and Anthony, or coming here, going the chase down, whatever. Like I think like there's worth remembering that like the guy who actually assembled the roster like also has a part in what has happened here. And like this isn't just like this is never just like one thing. This isn't just like JB is messed up. This isn't just the players didn't play well enough. This is they also maybe didn't assemble the best possible roster, didn't go aggressively enough with the trade deadline. Maybe like they didn't do enough to like keep another winger. Maybe they shouldn't have traded for Carol Silver. Like there are other things than just like, oh, Bickerstaff got outcoached or Donovan Mitchell didn't play well in this series. That is all. I just think that is worth remembering as we get to the end of the season, that this isn't just like what has happened isn't just like one specific thing that causes this. And Kobe like has a part in that.
I agree with you. I think the quote that Kobe Altman said, that there was nobody at the deadline that moved the needle for them, may come back to bite the Cavs, especially just watching how limited depth-wise they are, because other than the core four, Karis LeVert and Isaac Okoro, like you don't really have much going for you for Cleveland in terms of rotations, depth, things like that. And I agree, JB Bickerstaff made some questionable decisions, whether it was starting LeVert, defending Brunson with Osman or Garland for possessions, relegating Okoro to the back end of the rotation, giving Ricky Rubio these weird like 6-minute bursts. And it's just, you feel like the Cavs are experimenting a little bit still, like they're trying to like maybe figure out their game plan on the fly at times. And I'm not going to say they didn't prepare for this series. I'm not going to say they didn't make adjustments, but it's just the Cavs are lacking in depth, and the fact that they remained static instead of dynamic at the deadline could come back to bite them in a really major way. And I know folks will point out to Josh Hart saying like, oh, the Cavs could have gotten him and kind of prevented him from being a Cavs killer. And I know Cam Reddish was one of the players that was moving that deal, but the big thing was the fact that New York gave up a first-round pick to acquire Josh Hart, and the Cavs just didn't have that ammunition in their back of their pocket. But again, the Cavs were always going to be asset-starved after acquiring Donovan Mitchell. To your point, maybe Ochai Agbaji. I don't know if Ochai Agbaji would have been a difference maker on this team just because he's a rookie, and there's already guys that are pretty much.
But it gives you. But it's about for the future as well, because like now you're just staring down stuff. It just is. Like this is just the reality of like when you make a trade like that, which you do 10 times out of 10.
Yeah,
you have things you have to figure out, and like people can like you can defend your favorite team. The organization can get like mad about things. Like whatever, that's fine. Like when things don't work, like there's causes for it, and like there's just things that like. Yeah, they don't have a first round pick. Okay, like, but how did you get? To me, it is much more interesting and like I think reasonable to be like, okay, here's why they don't have these first round picks, and unpack that more than like, oh, they don't have first round picks. Because I still maintain that like the original sin in all of this is not like giving up what they gave up for Mitchell. It's like I think you probably overpaid for Karis LeVert. You could have gotten Karis LeVert for like seconds and figure that out, but then you don't have that other first, and that cost you Agbaji, which could have been another asset you could have flipped for Royce O'Neal, or like gotten in, like you put yourself down a path there that I think the Mitchell trade then just kind of increasingly emphasized. I think that to me is really the original sin, was that trade was like getting ahead of themselves a little bit. That is really where I go back to. It's like that was the mistake in all of this by Altman in the front office.
So my counterpoint to that is there is also a reality where the Cavs don't acquire Donovan Mitchell. They still have Larry Marketing, Colin Sexton, and Ochai Agbaji along with Karis LeVert on their roster. Yeah, maybe we feel differently about this team. I understand that. I understand that. But I'm just saying, in the heat of the moment, the Cavs needed some secondary shot creation to mitigate the pressure on Darius Garland. And it didn't work because LeVert was never healthy for the Cavs. And the Cavs never really get to look at like what it looked like with LeVert in the starting lineup until the very last game of the season, which is the play-in loss to the Hawks. So it's tricky. It's tough. And now that they are asset starved, I think they can trade their 2024 first rounder. But it's still not enough to really do things. And now you have to have that uncomfortable conversation of, okay, maybe JB Bickerstaff's on a bit of a shorter leash next year. And I know like they could be starting down the reality of Luke Walton if Bickerstaff doesn't work out. But there's also the outside hire too. Like I think of the Hawks who hired Quinn Snyder just like in the middle of the season and just figured him out on the fly. Like it's not a perfect thing, but like the coaching can be addressed one way or another. But the uncomfortable conversation is, okay, we have Donovan Mitchell, who is in his prime and has, I believe, 2 years left on his contract. You have Darius Garland, who just started his rookie maximum extension, who kicks in next year. Evan Mobley's coming down the pipeline too, and we need to maximize maybe the wiggle room we have financially while he's still on his rookie scale contract. Maybe this is the uncomfortable conversation where like you knock on a team like Dallas's door and somehow get some assets from the Mavericks for Jared Allen and then refocus those assets to something else. And like you go to Brooklyn and say, hey, like Royce O'Neal or Joe Harris or even Dorian Finney-Smith. Like the Brooklyn has a glut of wings, and a lot of them aren't going to be with the Nets next season. I know like Mikal Bridges is like their star, quote unquote, and like the Cavs aren't going to be able to acquire him. But like this is when you have the uncomfortable conversation of like, yeah, we've built something really, really nice here, and we have a lot of guys that are fun and they play well together, but when you look at the long-term vision, if Evan Mobley's shot doesn't develop, Jared Allen's never going to become a plus-plus shooter. Like, you need to find shooting next to him at the 4 just to create more spacing in the lineups to begin with. But it's just so hard to figure out what the next steps are because the Cavs cashed in all their assets to get Donovan Mitchell. And sure, in the moment, like when you look at just the trades every team made over the summer, like the Cavs made the best one, and the Cavs have set themselves up pretty nicely just in terms of just top end talent between just Garland, Mitchell, and Mobley alone. Allen too, like he's still on this roster, so he of course gets mentioned. But I agree with your take. Like, I think JV did a lot of confusing things, but a lot of this does go on the fact that, like, hey, the Cavs had a pretty clear need on the perimeter. They had a pretty clear need for perimeter shooting. I think just Donovan Mitchell going Super Saiyan to start the season and just consistently running hot has been really beneficial for the Cavs. And I'm sure, like, I know the mantra was it's not championship or bust this season, and they are focusing on what is next and down the line. But to your point, trading that first and Ricky Rubio for Karis LeVert could have been a misstep because it sacrificed an asset you could have used later. Like, there's a lot of just ways you can go about this, but if you're the Cavs, like, you have to course correct this summer and address a lot of these needs so that you're not staring down the barrel of the fact that you have 6 viable guys in your rotation, and then it's a sprinkling of Jetty Osman, Danny Green, who's on the last legs of his career, Ricky Rubio, who's not 100%, and then like Dean Wade, who's been banished to the Shadow Realm, and Lamar Stevens, who may not sniff the court for the entire postseason.
Worth noting on Donovan Mitchell, he has next year, and he has a player option for 25-26. You are proving this year and next year are about proving to Donovan Mitchell that he wants to like sign up this for the long term. Because I would bet you he's opting out of that contract in 26.
It's a two-way street. Like, Mitchell, I think, has more than done enough up to this point. It's disappointing to see his defensive upside kind of vanish in this postseason run, especially because he's just been playing so well defensively during the regular season. But yeah, the Cavs need to make some moves. Like, they made their big boy move. Like, they're saying, hey, we're ready to become a legitimate team in the Eastern Conference behind our supernova talent of young players just across the board. And you need to make some legitimate upgrades in order to prove to Mitchell, like, hey, this is worth your while. So you don't trade all these assets for Mitchell. And then, I mean, you're still in a good spot with like Garland and Mobley and Allen, of course, but like, it's certainly not the same, and your assets starved. And it would really suck to like watch him just like walk away from Cleveland and then go to the Knicks or something like that. Cause like that seems like a viable path. And I'm sure if the Cavs struggle next year, flame out, like those vultures will be circling.
Yeah, we'll get to that way in the future. Want to remind you again that the Cavs play Game 5 Wednesday, 7 p.m. You can catch every moment of the Cavs' hometown broadcast on SiriusXM on the SXM app. I will forget how to say that someday. Search Cavs. It is a mouthful. Thanks again for making Locked On Cavs your first listen every day. Every dares. We'll be back after Game 5 with a recap of, again, what is a win or go home game for the Cavs. I'm Chris Manning. That's Evan Dammarrell. Thanks again to Jake Stevens for productions. Enjoy the hoops. Hopefully they're fun.